just want to say, I want to welcome everybody here today for what I think is going to be a really, really interesting conversation. And as I was saying there, this is about the community as well, and about having a conversation with the community. So, look, I think it's going to be a very positive and interesting event, and we are definitely going to be welcoming open discussion here as well. So what we're going to have now is a short video to give a bit of context for today.
On the 7th of April 2005, Gerry Adams made a direct appeal to the IRA to embrace and take an initiative to achieve the aim of Irish unity by purely political activity.
I want to speak directly to the men and women of Ugly na Huireann, the volunteer soldiers of the Irish Republican Army.
Gerry Adams making what he called an address to the IRA. He said they had kept every commitment made by their leadership. He attacked the two governments and unionists, but he said the struggle can now be taken forward by other means.
In the past, I have defended the right of the IRA to engage in armed struggle. I did so because there was no alternative for those who would not bend the knee or turn a blind eye to oppression, or for those who wanted a national republic. Now there is an alternative. I have clearly set out my view of what that alternative is. The way forward is by building political support for Republican and democratic objectives across Ireland, and by winning support for these goals internationally. I want to use this occasion, therefore, to appeal to the leadership of Ugly na Huireann to fully embrace and accept this.
He said nationalists and Republicans have a confidence that will never again allow anyone to be treated as second-class citizens.
So I also want to make a personal appeal to all of you, the women and men volunteers who have remained undefeated in the face of tremendous odds. Now is the time for you to step into the barn of Wheel again, not as volunteers risking life and liberty, but as activists in a national movement towards independence and unity. Such decisions will be far-reaching and difficult, but you never lacked courage in the past. Your courage is now needed for the future.
Mr. Adams said he knew that this truly historic decision could only be taken in the aftermath of intense internal consultation, and he asked them to initiate this as quickly as possible.
With me now, Sinn Féin's chief negotiator, Martin McGuinness. Martin McGuinness, 10 years after the ceasefire, Gerry Adams says the IRA must engage in intense debate about abandoning armed struggle. Surely that's what it should have done 10 years ago.
Well, peace processes are always very difficult. They're never straightforward. It's not like walking into a room of darkness and flicking a light switch, as we have seen with other peace processes throughout the world. They're plagued by all sorts of difficulties, like, for example, the failure of the British to demilitarise, the whole issue of collusion between elements within British military intelligence and unionist paramilitary groups. So all of these things are difficult. What is significant about today's speech or statement, it comes from the foremost architect of the peace process, Gerry Adams. And his role as president of Sinn Féin, he has said very, very clearly that the search for peace and for justice and for Irish unity can now take place by purely political and democratic means. I think that's hugely significant, and he has appealed to the leadership of the IRA to accept as the way forward this alternative approach.
Now, this has been dressed up by Mr. Adams as an appeal, as a challenge to the IRA, but is it conceivable that he would have said what he said today without already having the agreement of the IRA?
Well, we don't have the agreement of anyone to anything. What we have is a very clear position put forward, and the IRA are aware of what Gerry Adams was going to say today. What people are looking to now is how the IRA will respond to that, and I hope that the IRA will respond to what Gerry Adams said today sooner rather than later. This is a hugely significant contribution. This is the defining period of the peace process. The peace process needs to be reinvigorated, revived, and put back into a good state of health. And we in Sinn Féin, as we have done consistently throughout the course of this process, are absolutely dedicated to see this peace process successfully concluded.
Your opponents say, of course, that this is cynically at the beginning of an election campaign.
Well, I mean, I think they're quite cynical in their approach. The fact is that the Meath by-election and the election and the uterus elections in Donegal over the course of last weekend clearly shows that the Sinn Féin vote not only is holding up but is increasing. And all of the political pundits, many of them hostile to Sinn Féin, are saying, even before Gerry Adams made his comments today, that Sinn Féin were going to make further advances in the Westminster election. We're effectively challenging for 7 seats. So that doesn't wash with me at all. This is a very serious contribution to a very critical time in the peace process and a very determined effort by Gerry Adams as President of Sinn Féin to put it back on a healthy footing.
Rush in another question. We understand there could be a response from the IRA within the next 24 hours. Will that be a definitive response in your understanding?
Well, I hope we do get a response to what Gerry Adams said today, but Gerry Adams, in the course of his contribution, made it clear that he accepted that there would have to be widespread consultation within the IRA about such a huge situation, and that may take some time.
Martin McGuinness, thank you very much.
3 months later, on Thursday the 28th of July 2005, the leadership of Óglaigh na hÉireann gave its response.
My name is Séanna Walsh. I'm a Republican ex-prisoner and have been asked by the leadership of Óglaigh na hÉireann to read the following statement. The leadership of Óglaigh na hÉireann has formally ordered an end to the armed campaign. This will take effect from 4 p.m. this afternoon. All IRA units have been ordered to dump arms. All volunteers have been instructed to assist the development of purely political and democratic programmes through exclusively peaceful means. Volunteers must not engage in any other activities whatsoever. The IRA leadership has also authorised our representative to engage with the IICD to complete the process to verifiably put its arms beyond use in a way which will further enhance public confidence and to conclude this as quickly as possible. We have invited 2 independent witnesses from the Protestant Catholic churches to testify to this. The Army Council took these decisions following an unprecedented internal discussion and consultation process with IRA units and volunteers. We appreciate the honest and forthright way in which the consultation process was carried out and the depth and content of the submissions. We are proud of the comradely way in which this truly historic discussion was conducted. The outcome of our consultations show very strong support among IRA volunteers for the Sinn Féin peace strategy. There is also widespread concern about the failure of the 2 governments and the Unionists to fully engage in the peace process. This has created real difficulties. The overwhelming majority of the people in Ireland fully support this process. They and friends of Irish unity throughout the world want to see the full implementation of the Good Friday Agreement. Notwithstanding these difficulties, our decisions have been taken to advance our Republican and democratic objectives, including our goal of a united Ireland. We believe there is now an alternative way to achieve this and to end British rule in our country. It is the responsibility of all volunteers to show leadership, determination and courage. We are very mindful of the sacrifices of our patriot dead, those who went to jail, volunteers, their families and the wider Republican base. We reiterate our view that the armed struggle was entirely legitimate. We are conscious that many people suffered in the conflict. There is a compelling imperative on all sides to build a just and lasting peace. The issue of the defence of nationalist and Republican communities has been raised with us. There is a responsibility on society to ensure that there is no reoccurrence of the pogroms of 1969 and the early 1970s. There is also a universal responsibility to tackle sectarianism in all its forms. The IRA is fully committed to the goals of Irish unity and independence and to building the republic outlined in the 1916 proclamation. We call for maximum unity and effort by Irish Republicans everywhere. We are confident that by working together, Irish Republicans can achieve our objectives. Every volunteer is aware of the import of the decisions we have taken, and all Óglaigh are compelled to fully comply with these orders. There is now an unprecedented opportunity to utilise the considerable energy and goodwill which there is for the peace process. This comprehensive series of unparalleled initiatives is our contribution to this and to the continued endeavours to bring about independence and unity for the people of Ireland.
On Monday, the 26th of September 2005, the Irish Republican Army issued the following statement. The leadership of Óglaigh na hÉireann announced on July 28th that we had authorised a representative to engage with the IICD to complete the process of verifiably putting arms beyond use. The IRA leadership can now confirm that the process of putting our arms beyond use has been completed.
Start with you, Séanna. Just in terms of the context, I think, of your own background in terms of your time, obviously, in jail and all of that. And one of the things, you know, when I was first elected as a TD, one of the things that I kept getting asked was, you know, what sparked your interest in politics and Sinn Féin and republicanism, and actually made me have to think about that, which I didn't really have to think about before. And undoubtedly it was the fact that I was really good friends with Séanna's daughters, and Séanna was always, you know, Séanna, obviously you were in the H blocks at that time, and I only ever knew you kind of as a concept, and then you got out of jail and surely you were no longer a concept anyway, because you're not that quiet of a person, and you became much more than a concept. But it definitely had a massive impact on me. But I think your story has a massive impact more broadly and more generally for republicanism, but also it really is a story of republicanism. So do you want to give a bit of a background to yourself?
Okay, Gurmagat, that's in Jesh Lordslev in you. Maria, well, Martyrch too. I went to jail. I was captured in an IRA operation when I was 16. Landed in Toulon Cache into the cages, where I first met Bobby Sands and a lot of other comrades who I came to know very well during the course of the years. One of the things about the cages was that we took an interest not only in our history, our politics, but also in the Irish language. So, tá sé gahin tak dúsa gwbl an Gaelic mar kids den fallacy, mar kids den strategy so ganya a map and show. And I ended up getting recaptured a couple of weeks after I was released in 1976. I was recaptured in Twinbrook, and this time we hadn't got political status. So we were into an immediate battle with the prison administration, and I was followed into prison by my comrade Bobby Sands, who was arrested just a few weeks after myself. And so we met again in Crumlin Road Jail in Islay, and Shin Huimwich Gaji na Blacana near a Deerimwich, Dullingwich and Trefsha Shin den Pluge, Trefsha v Eintak Donna, very, very difficult period of imprisonment, brutality and torture, which culminated in the hunger strikes of 1981. And then I suppose, there's so much that you could say. We could talk all day here, folks, about and stalk up agus Octawahan. But that's when we lost Bobby as the first of our hunger strikers. And, he was elected MP. One of the things about the election I would probably have to mention is that there were European elections here in the north in 1979, and there were a group of us were in H6. Bobby was there, the dark, big, Lorne McKeown, Shimmy Finucane, there were 30, Larry Morley. And one of the things that we did then was Pat McKeown suggested that we should take a stance on whether or not there Republicans should support the European election. And we then engaged in a letter writing campaign opposing anybody voting for any candidate, because we saw at that time that electoralism was going to take us up a blind alley, that the British don't listen to electoral politics, and they're not interested in how things go for Republicans. But whenever Bobby stood, whenever it was proposed, while Bobby was on the hunger strike, that was a big moment for ourselves, and we flung ourselves in behind that whole period then of writing and lobbying for support for Bobby during the hunger strike and that election. And then it was followed, as you know, by the election of Big Doc and Paddy Agnew in the southern election. So there was all sorts of discussion and debate in and around that period about elections and about electoral politics and what good would it do and what change would it make. So that was a big period in my life. Then I got released, and I got married, had a few daughters, a couple
Best
of
part
daughters.
of your life.
All right, I was,
Of course.
and I was reached at rugby worm and 3 year, and I ended up sentenced to 22 years in the H blocks once again, and I participated in the development of the politics within the prison at that stage. And I remember my good friend Pat Sheehan and I had many an argument and debate in and around where the politics of the early 90s were going. The thing about Thatcher was that she was very determined to defeat the IRA. That was the politics of the time. And I remember the whole thing about the British, where their stance changed, that you had the British general in charge of the north here, went public, and he said that the British Army could not defeat the IRA. And very shortly after that, we had Peter Brooks saying that Britain had no selfish strategic or economic interest in remaining in this part of Ireland. And for me then, I realised that we were entering something different. So from then on, this whole process of political change and the dynamic behind it has been very, very much a part of all that.
Yeah, and we will touch then on, I suppose, that next period. I suppose, obviously we're here, Gerry, to talk about 2005, 20 years ago, and the 20th anniversary of that, but obviously nothing happens without its own context. It's historical context, it's political context, the context of the people, the communities of that time. Do you want to give us a bit of a background as to, in terms of the historical context in the lead up to 2005?
Margaret Yor, Maria Gormila. August Tamayan Sasta, Skiap the More Marshaw Echo, as Talan Dini. Our fod and Shumra Shaw a Glock Parch Moore, Sun process, Manra, August Fear, August Alan Ear Kimi and Shaw Foster, Manra Ardwahan and the Black on the Hitch, no prison Ella. So it's our sort of star, Neil Star and IRA, a star, Nadine Welsh Shumra Shaw, August. Like in Tom Kieran at Kyle Midge, Dini and the Fihablain, like ta Ted Emaha, ta Beck Emaha, ta Bob Moore Emaha, Shaw and La and a were Maureen Wilson Bass, Lento and Soshan and Slee and a will Arseal, Egg Dull. So I'm glad to see such a good crowd here, and also I just want to acknowledge that a lot of the people in this room played very significant roles in the process that we're discussing. So this isn't an IRA thing solely. or a Sinn Féin thing solely. It's all of us here together, those of us who are old enough. And there's a lot of younger people here, so hopefully you'll pick up something from what we're saying. Bill made the Séanna cast he and Jag. I first met Séanna in Cage 11 at the time when Bobby and the rest of them were there. And I actually used to have a view that too much importance is put on the educational process within particularly the cash, because I used to even be slightly angered that the Brits would have said, or at least Brit journalists would have said, it was the University of Long Cash, and I maybe was a youthful reaction, that we were all stupid, and then we went to Long Cash, and we got smart. So it wasn't like that. There was an ongoing. My sense of struggle is, particularly in this town, is that we have had processes of ongoing engagements, of discussions, even informally. So if you fast forward to 1976 or 77, when some of us got out of prison, and it was clear that the army could have continued its armed campaign forever. It had enough support for it. It obviously had the capacity, and it had clever people and brave people. But the Brits were militarising, increasingly militarising, and what had maybe a few short years beforehand been a popular uprising on the back of the civil rights struggle, on the back of Bloody Sunday, on the back of internment, what had been a popular uprising was being squeezed down, because it was dangerous to go on a demonstration. Some of you old enough will remember women putting hurling helmets on their kids when they were picking up out of school, because there were so much rubber bullets and plastic bullets being used in this part of Belfast and other parts of Belfast. So the Brits were trying to squeeze the whole thing, and resistance was widespread. It wasn't just armed resistance. I mean, there are numerous people who engaged in acts of resistance every day of their lives, and we're never near a gun. We're never in the IRA. I remember a funny story. Henry Mackay, he's dead since, used to live in the front of the Falls Road, and I was in his house one day, and I noticed his water was running continuously in the bathroom, and I said to him, your water tap must be broken. And he said, no, that's a protest. Since interment, I've kept that tap running. And there were others, like Brendy O'Fee is one that springs to mind, who give their names in Gaeilge. There were women all the time in the front line when young people were being harassed by British Army patrols, were intervening. The famous hen patrols, which accompanied the duck patrols, the breach of the falls curfew by the women who went down and just swept aside the Brits at that. But it was also clear that this culture of resistance, it was clear we couldn't be defeated, but it wasn't enough not to be defeated. We had to win. And you don't win playing in your own section of the field. You have to go into their part of the field. You'll see this tomorrow in the football. Right? You have to play in their part of the field, which is dangerous. So one of the first things that we started to explore, and there was a small group of us, was actually the word peace. Just the word peace. And I always remember one of our stalwart Green Cross collectors saying to me one day, are we for peace? Because it had been a concept which had been stolen by the British, by the Irish government, by the propaganda media. And what is peace? It isn't just an absence of conflict, it isn't just an absence of war. It has to be the presence of equality, of justice, and so on and so forth. And then we started to debate, well, how do you get peace
And enter Father Alex Reid, enter Father Des Wilson, and then subsequently myself and John Hume. And the answer to that was straightforward, was dialogue. That's how you do it, you talk, you listen. And then we also realized that we couldn't do this on our own, that there had to be a bigger movement than us, and that the IRA, of course, had had its role, but the IRA was limited to those acts of armed resistance that we've talked about. So all of that process, and I'm collapsing this because I don't want to be giving answers which are too long-winded, but all of that led to us adopting what we call strategic objectives. It led to us learning the lesson of the anti-apartheid movement. The British were saying to the world and its brother, this is an issue, it's internal to the United Kingdom, butt out. It doesn't matter from the European Union, from America, from anywhere else, none of your business. So we wanted to internationalise that, to get beyond that, to get outside that block. And we developed the concept in our own terms. We obviously had a very strong support base in the USA, strong organisation in NORAID, but we wanted something bigger than that, and something which wasn't limited, but could bring everybody together who could support basic concepts. We also started dialogue with unionists who would talk to us, with Protestant church leaders, with Protestant ministers, and all of those things all happened. In the meantime, what Séanna has sketched out was happening. The protest in Armagh, the hunger strikes, the electoralism. We were looking at electoralism as a concept, as a mode of struggle. We produced a couple of seismic documents towards a lasting peace, scenario for peace. Sinn Féin was the first party to actually adopt peace as a political objective. It was mostly passed unmentioned because we were being censored. So most of the media didn't even cover it. We probably weren't even aware that this party had this political objective of peace. So all of that started to meld together. The electoral element of it was given a huge momentum by Bobby's election, by Big Doc's election, by Paddy Agnew's election. And then John Hume and his discussions with me and the dialogue arising out of that brought it to a different plane. So I can continue for another moment or two, or I'll shut up and let you.
Well, we can come back then to further. So I think you've kind of set the context quite well then. And Shane, I suppose something you were coming to there was after you went back into jail after marrying and being the luckiest man in Ireland for Marion Sinead. But after that period, and then you went back in. You were talking about, the conversations maybe that were happening there in terms of what was happening, the political developments and what political prisoners were discussing at that point. Do you want to delve into a bit into those conversations?
Well, the thing about it, whenever the leadership, whenever Sinn Féin really sort of started moving into that period that Gerry's talking about, the development of a political process particularly to internationalise the context. And we could see that ourselves within the jail, and we participated in it. And we were kept informed of every sort of initiative that was coming along. Whenever the IRA ceasefire, in August 1994, whenever that came, we had a job in our hands because some people felt that, that you can't have a ceasefire until the Brits say that they're leaving. So we had to engage with people and help them understand that that this was simply another move, another strategic initiative to move things along, to move us from the sort of standoff that we were in with the British. One of the things that that then happened as you get further into the peace process and the second IRA ceasefire was the engagement on the international stage with the South Africans. And that actually led to Mandela sending over a team of, at the request of Gerry Adams, Mandela sent a team of his negotiators over to talk to ourselves, and they were actually brought into Long Kesh to discuss with us how they were able to bring about the change that led to them attaining power in South Africa. And that was, for me, that was possibly one of the most momentous events of that, that whole period. But as we get into the Good Friday Agreement and we get into that whole process, we were released then, or I was released in September '98, and the final prisoners were released in July 2000. But almost as soon as we were released, some of us, we went back to the movement and we said, look, we want to be part of this. We want to be part of what's happening here. And one of the jobs that we were given, one of the jobs that we set ourselves, was to go out and engage with volunteers all over the country. And so, there were teams of us up and down in different cities and different counties and different villages. We weren't only talking to our activists, we were talking to our families, Republican families, the Republican base, and we made sure that everything that was happening, that people had a sense of what was happening and why it was happening. Whether or not they agreed was up to them, but we saw it as our task to engage, and that's why whenever you talk about the whole thing about it's a community. It wasn't just the movement. It wasn't just the army itself. Then I suppose in 2005, the peace process and the whole political process had run into difficulty, and once again the army leadership took the initiative, and they came along, a few comrades, I'll not call them friends, came along and said, look, this is what we want you to do. How do you feel about it?
How did you feel about it?
well, the point about it was a wee bit taken aback at the very idea of going on television, and that it would be something that would be broadcast globally. You say, so if my Rudbug nervous shock, mar a hilda. And I said, look, okay, but I'll have to discuss it with the family. And well, you know Sinead yourself. She's a very strong Republican in her own right, and she was in Armagh jail. And so we sat down and we discussed the ins and outs of it with the girls. And because I was concerned that it's okay for me doing what I'm going to do. I take that on myself. But what I was going to do could have an impact on my daughters in terms of how they would be treated, how they would be viewed, in terms of international travel, in terms of just maybe going to the shops, how it would impact on them. So they were very supportive, and we did it, and chin.
Well, it certainly was. I'll never forget seeing you all over the TV that day, and the impact obviously then it had internationally and nationally. But just to go back, I suppose, briefly, Gerry, into 1998, and obviously the Good Friday Agreement was achieved, and you were kind of leading up to that point there a bit as well. But how did that change the dynamic politically, but also within communities as well, I suppose?
Well, it would take too long to go through the detail, and even in preparation for this Crinnew, when myself and Richard were going through the events of the day. There were so many twists and turns and so on, so it would just take too long to take us through it, and I would probably forget bits and pieces of it. So I just want to deal with, broad concepts. And incidentally, I never thought of Séanna as a concept. It's a good, good way to go.
Well, I did for 8 years of my life, so.
Séanna Walsh, the concept.
It was quite a nice period of my life.
So, the things that we were sort of working around were, just very, very basic concepts, like for every strategy, there's a counter strategy. For every action, there's a reaction. That you have to get your defensive right before you can go on an offensive. That the most important constituency to negotiate with is an empowered base. If the base doesn't need to know all the twists and turns of the process, because nobody would know that, but the base has to be comfortable with the general strategy and conversant and understand, maybe disagree with bits of it or disagree with all of it, but still understand what was going on. And then that gives you the maneuverability to take Sinn Féin initiatives, or in this case, an army initiative. I've dealt briefly with the international dimension of all of this. We also, and this is really of key importance, the Ireland that we want, now we want a republic, and we want a republic ag bunú and Ferogra Níjag Séjag. We want a republic based on the 1916 proclamation. But we won't get that republic while the union continues. It's impossible. You can't get unless you have the right to self-determination. So the issue of self-determination, the principle of self-determination, becomes central. It's also broader than us, because it's given everybody their say in the future. And those who are currently unionists, or those who are from that northern Protestant constituency, they clearly have to be part of the new Ireland. They're ours. Yeah. We for all of our faults, and they for all of their faults. We're probably the only ones that want them. Brits don't want them. Nobody else wants them. But we want them. They're ours, just because of the experience and the rolling out of colonialism and the use of the old adage of divide and conquer. We have this divided island, partitioned island, and then a division among our people. So all of those became, principles is the wrong word, but became sort of the fundamentals in which we were setting up our strategic objectives. So I want to skip briefly through the Good Friday Agreement. First of all, to come to the Good Friday Agreement meant all of us, within the leadership and within the broad movement, and particularly within the Sinn Féin party, and our base. Because I don't see, I know Republicans in this town who have been as active as any volunteer or as any member of Sinn Féin for decades. And they're as much part of all of this, and deserve to be as much part of all of this as anyone. So the notion of going into Stormont, the notion of looking at policing, I'm just giving you those two examples, and I'm sure those of you who are old enough will remember how difficult it was to come to those. So then we had to sort of break down issues which we knew could not be dealt with in an agreement because we weren't strong enough. So some of it had to be given off to commissions or kicked up the road or something to come back upon. And in the meantime, we were talking to the Irish government. And we had an agreement with the Irish government based mostly on Hume Adams on the big thing of self-determination. And that was, for us, that was a fundamental in terms of that upcoming discussion. we came, those of us who were part of it, to the Good Friday Agreement without the unionist parties talking formally to us. Imagine. There was no discussion between the Sinn Féin party and the Ulster Unionist Party or the DUP or any of the smaller parties. The Loyalists had a different position. They were quite straightforward in fairness to them. I used to say jokingly that the only conversation I had in government buildings with unionists was in the men's room, where some of the more rounded ones would have the crack with you and say, how you getting on and what's the story and so on. But otherwise they didn't talk to us. I remember one time walking down the corridor with Martin McGuinness, and two unions were coming up, and I said, you're not going to say anything. And I won't name this guy. He said, well, could you ever a tattoo? So there's all of this madness. There was a huge team of us. By the time we got to the actual negotiations, we had about 4 or 5 years of negotiations done. We had what we used to call balls in the air, and the trick was to keep all the balls in the air at the one time. And we had recruited or got people within the party to, I see Barbara de Bruin here, she got all the complicated jobs, to actually zero in on issues which needed great detail. So we were able to say, like Gerry Kelly had responsibility for release of prisoners, and somebody else had responsibility for this issue, that issue, governance, and so on. So leap over all of that, and then you're starting to approach this period of 2005. We came to a realization, even though the Assembly was up, it was Seamus Mullen and David Trimble, that David Trimble couldn't carry his people with him. You know, and I actually, once we got over the initial sort of carry on that went on about the new Assembly, I met David Trimble quite a lot privately, and quite a lot on a Sunday out at Hillsborough Castle. The two of us just together trying to talk through things. So it became obvious that he couldn't carry his party, that the process was going to be sort of dogged with the ups and downs and all of the frustrations. And Martin and I came almost at the same time to the conclusion, why don't we try and get Paisley in? And that was based upon the fact that at different times during Assembly debates, you could see that he was listening to some things that were being said by the Sinn Féin representatives, particularly Martin or myself. And it was clear that he, despite all the bluster, was looking at the possibility of taking up a leadership position in the Assembly. So we decided that we would try and look at every obstacle that he was putting up and find a way of removing that obstacle. And we very assiduously started to work at that and make it the subject of a small heretic committee, a heresy committee that we put in place to look at all these different notions. At the same time, we told both governments that that's what we were going to try and do. And they understandably thought it wasn't possible. And I think in about 2004, I outlined some of this at a speech at Bodenstown about the need to move forward. And then that skips us up into Séanna's statement, or at least the statement that Séanna made on behalf of the Army leadership. But think back, did the Unionists welcome that? Was there, this is great, and it's understandably that would be the case. And we also, when we have these discussions, we need always to be conscious that the IRA killed a lot of people, injured a lot of people, and a lot of those folks are still out there today. Their families are still out there, and it's an understandable that there would be skepticism and concern and even hatred of republicanism among some sections. So we were trying to grapple with all of this, and I just want to tell one little story which I actually love telling. Right, we opened up. This isn't the story. The story's coming in a minute. We opened up a back channel to the DUP, and we didn't tell the governments, and this was secret, and we were looking at what we could do, what they could do, and so on. Now, remember, we're into the era now, for those of you who can remember, of Paisley's sackcloth and ashes. So every time we tried to ease it on, something like this happened, which made it much more difficult, given the justifiable annoyance among many Republicans and nationalists. And really, I think it would be fair to say that a lot of people thought this couldn't be sorted out. We also had a bit of a dilemma in that the Irish government under Bertie Ahern was, and Bertie Ahern deserves credit for his role in this, but Sinn Féin was starting to get strength in the south. So Sinn Féin was starting to become a political, threat's too strong a word, but a political element to it all. And that changed the Irish government's position, because they saw that we were starting to get popular support in places that we didn't have electoral support. So anyway, we came to an agreement with the DUP, and I think it was in 2006. This is long after the speech, right? And Ian Paisley was to go into the Assembly, and this is the story. And he was to read out a statement which he had agreed privately with us. And the statement basically was just setting out whatever we had agreed, but it meant that Sinn Féin and the DUP and the other parties were going to end up in a new executive. So we were all set, and about 20 minutes before he was to make the statement, he sent us word that he couldn't make it, that he had to scrap it, that there was an element within his party had rebelled and were withdrawing support from him. This was the 12 apostles you've heard talk of, right? So it was too late even to go and see him. We all got into the Assembly. He got up to make a totally different statement, which would have held the thing completely, would have just disappeared, and Michael Stone appeared. And it was at that exact moment that Stone burst into the front of the Stormont building, and Paisley couldn't make his statement, the whole thing. But we were sitting there, we heard all the sirens, we heard all the shouts. Martin McGuinness and I actually escorted Ian Paisley out of the place because nobody knew what was happening. We knew there was something really serious happening, right? And we also assisted, though we might deny it, Ian Oak out as well. And we went high-tailed down to Stormont House where Peter Hain, and we told Peter Hain that he needed to get Ian Paisley in, and this thing needed sorted out. So it always struck me there was an irony that what would have been perhaps I won't say fatal, but certainly a deadly blow against the next phase. And then, of course, it actually took quite a long time to get to the point where we got them back again. But I just think we should pay credit to the events of that day.
I'm conscious of time as well, and we need to be out of this room by 3:30, folks, just so you know, for another event. But and I want to move us on, I suppose, as well, into looking at the time ahead. But I think it's been a very good context piece. But I do want to give you the opportunity, if there's anything you felt needed to be added that you didn't have the chance to add in terms of the context of the time.
No, I do think
Yeah.
We need to move to what we do now.
That's the only question I do have for Séanna is just one question of what was the reasoning, or do you know what the reason, I suppose, was to move to a video statement, not just a written statement?
Well, I suppose it was the times that we're in it. It was the fact that, you know, that the world moves on.
Yeah.
The first statements would have been written statements issued. The next thing that, and in fact, some of the IRA statements had been done on tape in previous periods. So it was the natural to maximise the impact that you were going to have across the globe, to go for a television tape statement.
Fair, and you were the face of that, and forevermore. Forevermore. I suppose, like, you know, we are here to talk about the 20 years, the 20-year anniversary of this statement by Séanna, but we're also here to look, obviously, towards the future. You know, I'm here very much in the context, like, you know, me being here in Belfast and that, and a lot of people in this room obviously had a huge impact on me politically, and unfortunately some aren't here. And I just see Brandy, I see Sinead, and then obviously Bobby's no longer with us, who had a huge impact on me. But, you know, the reason I joined Sinn Féin is because I, you know, firmly believe in a united Ireland. That's what I strive for every day. And I think sometimes people in this room obviously understand that, but an awful lot of people don't understand that. They think, you know, you become a TD as some kind of a career choice, or, you know, my God, would you, as a career choice. But, you know, you're in it because you fully believe in the self-determination of the Irish people. And that unification and self-determination isn't solely a unity issue. It is also actually the self-determination of people, and especially so many of our communities that have been totally left behind and haven't had, I suppose, that power that they should have on a national stage. So when we're looking at moving forward and where we are at now, obviously the aim now is moving towards the unity referenda, winning those referenda in particular, and bringing as many people with us as possible. And I think one of the things, Gerry, that you talk about an awful lot is, you know, the need for bringing as many people as possible with us. You know, we think of the likes of the GAA and how it brings all of the communities together. And in my view, that is, you know, that's the level that we want to be at in terms of our unity project. How do you think that has moved in the last 20 years, and how do you see that going forward?
Well, if we look at it in purely like Sinn Féin party terms, had some of us come into a room like this 30, 40 years ago and said that there would be a Sinn Féin First Minister, it would have been dismissed. I mean, the whole construct of this apartheid state that was to prevent such an occurrence. Now you have a thrown Republican woman in that position, that we're the largest party on the island of Ireland. And I won't go through the whole list of all the different elected representatives that we have. But it's how we use our political strength. It isn't just building political strength, it's the use of that political strength. And it's not just a job for the elected representatives, it's a job for all of us. We're all activists, and no matter how limited that may be, we mightn't be able to do what Séanna has done, but we can do whatever we can do to the best of our ability, and we need to have the space to do that. And my sort of life experience is that our views, broadly speaking, are shared by the vast majority of people in this island. And by that I mean equality, decency, fairness, treating people properly, having decent hospital services, having access to education, having a decent job with proper conditions, looking after people with disabilities, making sure that nobody is neglected, and shaping out a society which can do that, which we would see as being a Republican society. So that means we need to talk to other people, and sometimes we're fighting with these people in councils or in other forums. So, for example, why aren't Sinn Féin and the SDLP getting together on this? You know, Micheál Martin is out of step with the two main parties of nationalist opinion in the north. totally against the views of the SDLP, totally against the views of Sinn Féin on his position of no referendum on the future of the island. So we need to engage with those people, and it's also my experience that in most of the political parties, in the South particularly, there is a very, very strong Republican sentiment in all of the political parties, and we need to be engaging with those people as well. And then within what we call the Northern Protestant section of our people, there's no thinking person in that section that doesn't want a better life for themselves, for their communities, for their children, and for the future. They might disagree with us profoundly on the union and issues like that, but once you scratch it, once you get past whatever sectarian gatekeepers are out there, that's what people want. It's part of the human condition. So we need to be looking outwards. But I can say, as surely as I'm sitting here, there's going to be a referendum. Be sure of that. I mean, the Irish government doesn't want it. The British government didn't want it. Doesn't want it. The unions don't want it. But it's going to come. It's going to come in our time. Now, we who are United Irelanders need to start fighting that now and working with other people to make sure that not only does the referendum happen, but that it happens as part of a process of education, of information, of dialogue, of examination, and that we win the referendums. And that's our big goal. What's the DUP's main goal? In the next election for the Assembly, which is in 2 years' time, to dump Michelle O'Neill out of the First Minister's position. That's the sum total of the DUP strategy. All of their antics around casement, around bonfires, around legacy issues, all of it's geared towards that objective. And what we have to ensure is that the progressive alliance or coalition or consensus that is starting slowly to emerge up at the Assembly, that continues, and that Sinn Féin both increases our own strength and uses it intelligently, but also that we support other parties who have the same broad principles as ourselves, and that we deal in the same way with Micheál Martin with on Taoiseach. He's in breach of his party's policy. He's in breach of the Good Friday Agreement. He's in breach of the Irish Constitution. And we just need to intelligently, not to be, caught up in name calling, but just to intelligently deal with the issue. What government anywhere in the world with the possibility of writing the future refuses to plan for that? Because that's what Micheál Martin is doing. He's refusing to plan for the future. So there's lots of big challenges, and we have, broadly speaking, always come at this in a collegial way within our own party and argue the toss and fight, fall out, come down with different concepts, and then move forward, and then examine it, and then move forward, and then examine it. And that's what we need to do from now on to the referendums. And if anybody doubts what I'm saying about there going to be a referendum, go back to all the things they told us it couldn't happen, which we made happen, we and others. So we're going to make this referendum happen, and with a bit of good wind behind us, we're going to win the referendum.
Woo. I want to come back to the thing of, Republicans working together, Republicans of every shade, but I just want to touch initially on, just quickly on two things. One of the things you'd mentioned about, and I'm going to have to ask for quite succinct answers if that's okay, because we want to open it up to the floor, but just one of the things you were talking about, the game plan, and that, okay, so I've just been told we actually have a bit more time, so you don't have to be as succinct depending on how the mood is in the room. But I thought it was going to tell me to wind up. But I suppose one of the things you mentioned there was in relation to, unseating Michelle as First Minister and that being kind of a game plan. What do you think the Unionist game plan is? You have said there that a unity referenda will happen, right? So what do you think the Unionist game plan is at this moment? And then maybe you can also touch on what place is there for Orange, I suppose, in a united Ireland as well?
I was going to sing the sash, but
I don't know if we have that much time.
well, first of all, I think that thinking unionists know that the game's up. I think they know that. But it's not over. So a lot of their strategies and tactics is to dilute, is to delay, is to slow down, is to prevent. So it isn't that they have a clear vision. Some of them might think that they can make Northern Ireland a better place for all of the people who live here, but none of them are doing anything to prove it. You know, so they don't have a strategy based upon that notion. That's rhetorical. And without being patronising, it is very difficult for a unionist leader who wants to carve out a new dispensation to do so because of the history of unionism, which is essentially negative. You know, you're a Lundy. What we have, we hold. We are the people. No surrender. And all of those concepts, that doesn't give you much room to maneuver, you know? So we have got to try and also understand that unionism is essentially linked into the British system in terms of its tactics and its strategies. So I mean, the British government negotiated for the unionists during the Good Friday Agreement and in numerous other negotiations. The British government, Keir Starmer, who served here, I think, was he in the DPP or some such thing? Right, so he wasn't in government when all these dastardly things happened at the behest of his agencies. It was nothing to do with him. Yet he's putting the family of Sean Brown through all that they're being put through. And the Finucane family are only now getting the possibility of getting a confirmation of what we all know, that Pat Finucane was murdered by the state. Doesn't matter who pulled the trigger. So the British are fighting that battle, and the unionists are very, very dependent upon them doing so. And I think the end of partition, I think a decision by the people to vote for an end to the union will liberate those unionists who are captives of all of that history. There will still be, for as long as time goes on, unionists who will reject the place that they live in. And that's not unusual. That's happened in other countries in the world, and it's happened in our own country as well. But we have to make it as comfortable as possible. And in the same way as we removed all the obstacles that Ian Paisley was putting up, we either exposed them as being bogus or we removed them. And we have to do the same thing in terms of the journey that we have to complete. The Good Friday Agreement is an agreement to a journey without agreement on the destination. But the provision about the destination is based upon the people deciding. So our job is, you know, and you all need to think about this, you know, do you have Protestant friends? Do you have unionist friends? Do you have Protestant or unionist neighbours? For those of us who are in an elected office, do we talk about these issues? Do we try and develop, to think, and we have to listen to what they have to say. The kids in the village are condemned to no life because they're trapped in that type of setup. And if in a new Ireland people want to have bonfires, that's okay. You know, we'll do it in a way which is lawful and which is safe and which is, if it celebrates what they want to celebrate. There will clearly be orange parades, and you know, so some of us fought the good fight against orange parades coming in where they weren't wanted because they were triumphalistic marches as opposed to celebrations, whatever we might think of what they're celebrating if they want to do that. And yes, there's a brilliant little film about marching bands in Derry, and there is, within loyalism, a love of marching bands, of fifes and drums and bagpipes and all of that. So what we want to do is to remove the threat. I said the other day, the South isn't a sectarian song, but it's played in provocative sectarian ways. That's the problem. If you know the words of the South, it's just an old orange folk song. But when you decide to play it and batter the drum outside the Short Strand or outside the Mass or outside the chapel or outside a wake, or that's the problem. And that's something that has to be tackled, that sectarian element has to be confronted and made unlawful. But we need an Ireland in which unionism or orangeism, it's one of our national colours, green, white and orange, that they can at least have a sense that this not only is their place, but they have more say in it than they ever will have under British rule or in a divided Ireland. And that's up to us to be imaginative and to be persuasive about all of that.
Gormagat, Gerry, now that we do have a little bit more time, but don't worry, I won't keep people all night either. One of the things that Gerry was talking about was others who, who aren't in Sinn Féin or don't support Sinn Féin and their view on republicanism and that. And one of the things that I get quite a bit is Fianna Fáilers coming up to me and saying, I'm Republican too. I too believe in a united Ireland. And obviously going forward, we need as many people as possible to buy into the project and to look at how United Ireland will benefit the entire of society. You're obviously on the council, Séanna, but also you work within communities. How do you see that changing at the moment, even in terms of that dynamic and how people talk about United Ireland?
Well, first of all, I suppose what has to be said is that the 2005, 2006, that whole period, it was like the final sort of the final step, which allowed the people who had a broadly sympathetic idea of some sort of an Irish Republic to start to take a different approach to Sinn Féin, and it sort of freed them up to actually support us, right? So that's one of the things that I would say about that period. But the difficulty is that with Sinn Féin, people translate it as, even what it doesn't actually mean it. It means we ourselves. People translate Sinn Féin as ourselves alone, but ourselves alone isn't going to do it. Ourselves alone has to be part of, Sinn Féin has to be part and parcel of the whole broader movement which is going to bring about this republic, and of course we will be in the vanguard of it. In regards to working in the council, it's somewhat difficult. Particularly with the DUP, because as Gerry has pointed out, the DUP strategy at the minute is to get back to being the top dog, to displace Michelle O'Neill, and any sort of wee tactic or element or strategy that they can put in place to do that, they do so. However, it's incumbent upon ourselves as councillors to ensure that what we say we mean. When we talk about equality for all, that we have to show that through our actions and how we deal with them at a grassroots level in terms of whether it's funding, whatever the issues are. We have to ensure that unionist areas and that they are getting a fair crack of the whip in terms of that. In regards to engaging with unionism, we still find a difficulty at a community level that they do put gatekeepers up to try and keep us out. They try and limit the amount of contact that Republicans can have with people from the unionist community. But there are a number of different initiatives across the city where we have been able to breach that, and we will continue to do so. You know?
Yeah, that's very interesting, and I think that concept of we're looking for equality for everyone, we want empowerment of all communities and not just some, and that kind of leads me into my next question for you, Gerry, about the economics, because an awful lot of the time what is forgotten in the conversation about economics is actually the way economics is run now isn't to the empowerment of all communities, it isn't to the benefit of all communities, yet because I sometimes think, well, I actually think a lot of the time when the establishment doesn't want to be challenged on something, they'll always tell you it's far too complicated for our poor little minds to understand, so we should just take it at the status quo as it is and try not to question it, because sure, how would we know? And that was something that was a long period of time trying to do on the economic front, trying to make it out that this is just too complicated for ordinary people to understand, and bringing that now into this whole unity debate. But I think it's really important for us to have that confidence in terms of the economics, and specifically in the fact that the economics of the day is failing most communities. But see, in terms of that thing with, you know, can we afford a United Ireland? Obviously, the Commission did the paper in relation to the economic benefits of United Ireland. We've now seen recent research by John Doyle as well that backs up and goes into even more detail in relation to economics of United Ireland. See, for those people who genuinely just ask the question, can we afford a United Ireland? Not it's because it's what they hear and then it brings a fear into them. What would be your response be to those people?
Well, we can't afford partition. You know, we can't afford it. But we can't afford, in relation to the North, that decisions are being taken which are to the detriment of people who live here. There's the detriment of people who live in Britain as well, working people, working class people, but particularly here. And it just makes very straightforward sense that Ireland is a single economic unit with our own government, and particularly if Sinn Féin can either work with other people to have a government of national unity, or a Sinn Féin government that would be orientating policy towards the economy serving the people. So it's not inconceivable unless you have a strong political empowered movement of activists. It's not inconceivable that you could have a United Ireland and Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and some brand of what is currently unionism could be ruling the place in exactly the same terms, privatising the health services, not providing public and social housing, having all the disadvantages built into the system. So we need to be really, really focused on building an empowered movement which will move the politics of this island towards the type of republic that we want to see. And you don't judge, James Connolly said it famously, I'll say it in my way, you don't judge the quality of life in your society by the number of millionaires you have. You know, you judge it by the quality of life for the lower class. And and that particularly, I think, means people who just by virtue of birth, because they may have some special needs or some additional needs, or because they're from the wrong postcode, we just need to change all of that. But the straight question, read John Doyle's report, read the other reports, but just dealing with it in a very, very common sense way. How on earth could anybody in England, anybody in the London Parliament, govern this place in our interest? Just doesn't make sense. And we can do it ourselves, and we can do it far, far better. And we are a wealthy society. Divided, we're obviously not, but we are a wealthy society, and the wealth should be used for the benefit of the vast majority of the people here.
Yeah, I absolutely, absolutely agree with you there. And I would just encourage people that we need to be as confident as possible about that. And you mentioned how economically it impacted the North. Sure, it impacted, like partition impacted on the West. You know, if you look at the development of the West, across the West, like, you know, Donegal, but then also Gaeltacht areas in Galway and that. I'm just going to finish on one question for the two of you. And it's the question, I suppose, often in interviews you'll get asked, you know, what will a United Ireland look like? And the first thing that I always say is that Louis O'Hara's Sinn Féin TD in Galway East since the last general election. It was probably the proudest moment of my entire life when Louis got elected. But myself and Louis both grew up in Galway. We're both Irish Republicans. We both want to see a United Ireland. Our vision in terms of United Ireland could be totally different. And that's why we need to have those conversations about what a United Ireland would look like. But what do you envision, Shane? And we'll try and keep this short so we can move to the audience. But what do you envision in terms of a new Ireland?
Well, I suppose that the main thing, I've talked about the whole thing about equality. So equality and social justice has to be at the very heart of whatever new society that we're, you know, working towards. You talk about, you know, the place, there's my Hannafin for Dude and Changa, August and Gaelic. So Kahi Game Aichon and Changa, the first national language, Maya, you know, and truth. So that has to be, you know, somewhere that you feel confident and you're comfortable in, that your children can grow up in. And you know, the thing for me is, and a lot of the work that we have done, a lot of the sacrifices that have been made by our generation, is about creating a new Ireland, about ensuring that the lives that we live, the lives of struggle and conflict, will not be the lives of our children and our grandchildren. So.
Cormagat Shane agus Gerry
Well, and Perogra Nijag Shejog Assation and Perogra Sparsadorn. Like Corshid the principles Lehela, August Rinshe Air and Delio Gaboin, which is remarkable for Irish Republicans that they actually got it all on one page. But that's the foundation. That's the core principles are contained in the 1916 proclamation. The Commission Fuyan Tahi Eg Sinn Féin agus Tamid Yamak Eg Janu Diesbrak Leshalan Lan Dini Fuyan Tahi August Neil Fiber B Lynn Dini Oil Avay a Glockwood Parch or in the panel no or in Diesbrak. Sinn Féin has a commission into the future of Ireland, and it is quite remarkable. There are no problems getting people to sit on panels, people in exalted positions, people of knowledge, to talk about detailed positions on health services, on the economy, on identity, on women's rights, and all. There's no problem, and there's no problem getting audiences. People want to talk about it. People actually feel quite emotional in some cases, nearly planning the notional idea of what a new Ireland might be about. And one thing has emerged. There's a very, very, very strong positive sentiment within women to have those discussions, and particularly women from unionist backgrounds. And some of you were perhaps at different events here in this town, and some woman would stand up and say, I'm a prod, I'm from North Belfast, but I'm sick of the Tories. I don't like what they do UP. I want to have rights. And that needs to be recognised. We organised a women's assembly here some time ago. It was a chock-a-block with women. But they went on, nothing to do with Sinn Féin, they went on and organised their own Belfast Women's Assembly. So there's an independent women's assembly here in Belfast. They actually have an event in the Féile. dealing with these issues. So we should recognise that the best type of new Ireland we put together is one which the people, it's the reconquest of Ireland for the people of Ireland. Bobby Sands recognised this in his little, when he says, the day will come when the people of Ireland will have the desire for freedom in their hearts. And that's when we'll see the rising of the moon. Mm-hmm. And that's that notion of reconquest that James Connolly spoke about. So we can set out our views. I'm reconciled to the fact that struggle is permanent. It's a continuum. It will go on forever. And it's needed because there will always be things to be done and rights to be won and wrongs to be rectified. But that notion of the reconquest of Ireland by the people of the island, that's what I would say summaриses and should summarise our view of the future.
Go Margaret. Okay, Oslo much. Tá much chune oscail súsanéis agus seo níos socha ceisna atá a gceist ach córa atá a gceist. So we're going to open it up, but it's, this will be 15 minutes and we'll wrap up, but it's for people's contributions. It's not just like a questions and answers thing. So I'm going to take about 3 together, but if people want to indicate, and I left my glasses at home, so unfortunately, in some ways it's better because, if your name doesn't come to you straight away. So if people just indicate, and if I don't call your name, but just have there's a roving mic there, so there's 2 indications already, so we'll take 3 together and then come back.
Gora Margaret. Cast Gerry. Gerry, was it an omission or a mistake in the negotiations leading up to the Good Friday Agreement that the power to call a referendum in the North sits in the hands of the British Secretary of State? And what can we do as a group, as an organisation, as activists to put pressure on to allow that question to be dealt with?
Margaret and Kate and Ella. Do you want this? And Kate and Ella, and if somebody else could indicate there as well, because we'll take 3.
Thanks. Billy from Derry, and it's great to be here via Dubai. A questions again for Gerry. Apologies, Gerry, you're probably going to get a handful of these today.
Séanna says he wants a question.
All right, Nabby, I'm there.
You mentioned that whenever you were coming up towards 2005, you had many meetings with Trimble. You said there, our very own Mark McGuinness, you had to try and pull and convince Paisley to come along. And now we're here watching the work of Ireland's future, Belfast, Fairland, Fobble, our own Fairland, Derry. Are we still trying to pull the unionist loyalists along? And throughout that entire journey, did the unionist loyalist community ever come to you? And I guess on a personal level, as a Derry man, you mentioned the Finnegans and Sam Brown and the Legacy Act. Do you think there'll ever be a resurgence for Sammy Devaney?
Go Margaret. Yeah, one more, and contribution as well. Don't be afraid to give your mind, speak your mind, and doesn't need to be questions. So is there one more there? Anya? Okay, I just can't.
Yes, thank you. I'd like you both to comment, given the day that's in it, on the role of Féile, both in the struggle that you've described and in the time ahead in relation to Irish unity. Thank you.
Okay, Gurmina Margaret, I thought you were going to say in the fact that it's a anniversary of the Cuban Revolution as well, maybe they'll comment. But some of it was directed at you, Gerry. I'll give Shane a chance as well.
Okay. Well, the simple one's the one about Féile. The role of Féile is clear. Féile provides a forum, a platform, an occasion. Féile is a state of mind. And the more we can spread that, the more we can encourage that, the better. And I mean, I welcome the fact that Féile is organising in other parts of the city, and that there are similar events, flaws or festivals in other places. So the more of this type of engagement and celebration, and just having fun. And I'm always minded of the the big night, the big dance night, where 10,000 people, mostly kids and some old chancers, cavorted themselves. A lot of those kids are from loyalist parts of this city, and they tell the field of people that because they know that they'll get the tickets if they're from Sandy Row or Highfield or somewhere else. So, Fianna is, and full credit to Kevin and Anya and the whole Fianna team. The issue of legacy is quite complex because the British government doesn't want to face up to these matters. There have been a number of agreements made which the British have broken. A number of processes started, which the British then subverted. So I can't comment specifically on Sammy Devaney, but I do know that of all victims or survivors, and the term victims is used in a very general way, that there is no, complete sort of stereotypical victim. There are some victims who are the best peacemakers. Some people, including those who have suffered grievously at the hands of the IRA during the armed campaign, who are courageous, forgiving, decent, and want the future to be without any repetition of what passed before. There's also, understandably, those who have been so traumatized that they don't want, and there are others who just want to get on with their lives, and they're private people in Séanna. So it's the British government which are the block and are providing the block to some of these families getting the truth of what they're looking for. We had a decent, I said it almost in passing, during the Good Friday agreement. We had a decent camaraderie with the members of the Progressive Unionist Party, and that relationship with me anyway continued until David Irvine's untimely death, and we continue to do our best, and I know that comrades here in Belfast continue to dialogue with loyalist representatives and with people from loyalist areas, and there's huge work done trying to keep interfaces quiet and trying to make sure that kids aren't sucked into conflict, and that needs to be maintained and sustained in the time ahead. The business about the British Secretary of State being the person who will call a referendum, and bear in mind, these are multi-party agreements, but essentially the two key elements to them are the two governments. So if there's a weakness in that responsibility rests with the Irish government, and obviously the British government wants to have as much control as it can. But I wouldn't pay much heed to it. No British Secretary of State will call a referendum. It's above their pay grade. Right? Do we imagine that the British Secretary of State is going to say, what's the criteria for this or what? That's nonsense. A British cabinet, a British government will call a referendum. The Secretary of State may or may not be the person who presents it. But a British government will not do that if an Irish government's not asking them. Right? So I think it's legitimate for some folks to say, look, we want clarification and so on, right? I wouldn't give them, they don't have the right. You know, it's we who are making the concession. They don't have the right to set the criteria. That rests with the people of the island. And it's up to an Irish government to say to a British government, we want a referendum, we want it to be preceded with dialogue, conversation, so on and so forth, and we want it on such and such a date. So it will be government to government. That process will be assisted by our friends, notwithstanding the current guy in the White House, will be assisted by our friends in the White House, and will be assisted by people in the European Union. So I wouldn't be too concerned about that. The fact is, the Irish unity debate, the future of the island, it's almost daily part of the public parlance. It's almost daily in the media, good, bad, and indifferent. And what we need to do is to, I mean, Maria's given examples there of people from other parties who are saying to her, and they're telling the truth.
Yep.
I'm a Republican too. So the next question to them is, well, what are you doing about it? Same question for ourselves. What are we doing about it? So that's my take on that.
Cormac, I'll just briefly go to you, Séanna, faoin féileags and John Chin.
Okay, I still got an Tien Kesta or an Kit and Tien Rudger while I'm ra, say for doing an Ela, because first having Fragro with Gerry for doing an Ya Kestella. But I had the pleasure of being at the first Fela in 1988, but then I missed a few after that for a while. Fela and Fubble, it just in that name. You know, we talk about Fela, but it's Fela and Fubble, the people's Fela, the people's festival. That's what's so important about it, and all its aspects. And you know, and I know that whenever you talk about you know, discussions, debates, but it's about the fun, and as Gerry says, it's a state of mind, and it really is. It's something very precious to this community, which we should endeavour to, and you know, spread as much as we can right across the city and further afield. And also, one of the things you got to remember is it's not just the summer Fela. We also have Fela and Ari. We have the Drake, which is the spring festival, and you have Drake, which takes place in around Halloween. So, you know, you're spoiled for choice, folks.
I think Gurbin, Barach Jazz, Gerry Chur, leis an ócáid seo, leis an méid bhí ráit sin ag Jim. I think that's quite a good and strong way to finish up what was quite an historic event. But while this was an event based, I suppose, on historic events, really what this is about as well, and what's crucially what this is about, is looking forward into the future and achieving our goals and achieving our goal of Irish unity. And the thing is about all of us coming here together to listen to Gerry and to listen to Séanna, we're coming together here as people who are strong and proud and active Irish Republicans. And what we need to do now is make sure that as we leave this room, as we tell other people in our communities, in our families, in our friendship groups about this event, that we talk about this event, but that we also bring it forward and talk about a united Ireland, and that we deal with people as broad a range as possible to get them on board in an active way, as Gerry said, in an active way in terms of their republicanism. Because if you scratch the surface of the vast majority of people that live on this island, deep down in them is an Irish Republican, and we need to awaken that in them, but awaken the activism part in that as well. Because in order for us to achieve our goals of self-determination of all the communities across this island, we will need to have a strong campaign that brings everybody together. So it's not an easy job at hand, but it is an exciting thing to be involved in. It is incredibly exciting to be able to look at the future and look at what kind of society we want to create, and we all need to be central to that. So Gurmina Mahagi as Chaftan Shaw and Ya August Tom Kincha, go vecum Wujikela, egg Oka Giela Marchoj go Phelan Fubble.